strong one-handed rebound by Burness.
Yeah, the Panthers down by 2, now at 3. There's DeRiggi with the steal.
Takes the time to be aggressive, and it paid off. Matty DeRiggi has tied the game.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
We welcome you into another episode of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. Sean Meyers joined by the one and only Jack Ridenour. And Jack, it's been a miserable week weather-wise, but hopefully we'll heat things up a little bit with this show today. We got a lot to get to. Our plays of the week, of course. Our team of the week, the Kiski Area Cavaliers boys basketball team, and what a win they had a week ago. Also, a look ahead at all the games upcoming on the docket that hopefully will be played as scheduled. But
fingers crossed, Sean.
Yeah. We've had a lot of postponements, rescheduling, things of that nature. Winter weather has certainly played a factor. But let's talk about some of the biggest stories from this past week with our starting 5 takeaways. And we'll begin with a pretty significant milestone for Greater Latrobe boys and Max Butler. It felt inevitable, Jack. If you have the last name Butler, you're going to get to 1,000 points in your high school career. Max, the 4th and final brother of the Butlers, all 4 now in the 1,000-point club. Really impressive. Not only his individual performance getting there, but what this Wildcats team continues to do. Their only blemish, a loss against Uniontown, and certainly Butler's been a big part of their success.
Yeah, pretty cool milestone to say the least. And not to mention, you add to it that, he becomes the 4th brother to do so. Interestingly enough, he does it against Albert Gallatin, just like his brother Austin did. And then Landon and Bryce scored their 1,000th point against Penn Trafford. So a little bit more of the little nuances, if you will, in him scoring 1,000 points. But yeah, this Latrobe team looks really good right now. And if they keep playing like this, knock on wood, they stay healthy, they could do a lot of damage. And I know that 5A is very, very loaded this year. I know that it's very competitive. Seeing Penn Trafford and Franklin Regional on Friday, and even with Franklin Regional being a team that right now is, sliding, if you will, they're still very competitive and they're going to put up a fight. And so I think for Latrobe, they still have a lot of work to do, but a big win. And not to mention following that up against Gateway and taking down the Gators as well. So gaining more ground in the section. I don't see why this isn't a championship level team, Sean. I really don't. I mean, with all the pieces they have, and then again, you have John Wetzel leading the way and the success he brings from the football field. Clearly, it's transpired over into the basketball court as well.
Yeah, and so we're at the point now where you really start to kind of see some separation in most sections in terms of the teams that are going to get in. Remember, 4 teams at least from each section. So if you're in the top 4 right now, you're in a good spot. If you're in 1st or 2nd place, you're probably almost a shoo-in to make the postseason as long as you have some separation. And the Wildcats have done that. They were behind Uniontown. Red Raiders are 8-0, but the Wildcats are now 7-1. That win against Gateway really was significant because it moves them 2 games ahead of the Gators, who are now 5-3. And, the one blemish against Uniontown, we talked about their response afterwards. Seems like they certainly righted the ship, and I'm sure they're licking their chops, albeit on the road. They're going to see the Red Raiders again coming up. But Greater Latrobe playing some really good basketball right now. A team that had been playing some really good basketball, but suffered a kind of deflating section loss is Dairy Area boys. And I know that this is a team that we've been able to really see grow, a program that we've seen grow, of course, them making the state playoffs last year and having such a great run. But they finally suffered their first section loss, Jack, by 5 points. I still think this is a team that's going to make some noise. But of course, we mentioned so often how you respond after you suffer what could be considered a deflating loss.
Without question. And I think also it was a loss where if they had not taken down East Allegheny in their next game, I think that would have been a big game to bookmark in their season where they look back and say, that's maybe where things started to fall for us. Against East Allegheny, it was not easy for them either. They trailed at halftime against an East Allegheny team that, last I looked, has not won a game in the section. So Dairy, after the really strong start, went 6-2 through their first 8 games. They have started to hit a little bit of a wall. Stanley Ratchkovich, I mean, he's been playing great basketball. I mean, he had 26 against Elizabeth Forward. Then he follows it up with 30 points against East Allegheny. But as we've seen with a lot of these teams that kind of have one driving force, if you, as the old saying goes, if you cut the head off the snake, you pretty much, you defeat it. that's kind of what I think with Derry. Now, obviously, he's got great supporting casts around him and great supporting members around him. But I do think that if you eliminate him out of the equation, and I think teams have started to figure that out, if you take him out, it's a lot easier. And looking at the article, actually, Coach Esposito mentioned that the turnovers really plagued them against Elizabeth Forward. They were actually beating Elizabeth Forward in the first half, 13 first half turnovers. And Coach Esposito mentioned we don't have as many of those, maybe half of that. It's a 15, 16-point game. And, Sean, you and I might be having a very different conversation right now.
Well, and so the other way to look at it, Jack, is you mentioned that Stanley has gone off in some of these games. He had 26 points in the loss against EF. Maybe teams could look at it the other way. They will kind of let him do his damage. And of course, it's not just scoring with him. I mean, he patrols the paint. He can rebound. He can contest, block, alter shots. Maybe teams are starting to say, let's make sure no one else beats us. A guy like a John Wasnick, for instance. And EF did have a really good week. I mean, they not only knocked off Derry Area, they're a team that now is in that section championship discussion. It's Bell Vernon, Derry Area, EF, all kind of similar. And remember, Derry Area beat Bell Vernon earlier in the season to hand the Leopards their only losses. They're only lost in section play. So it's kind of a jumbled mess. But I do feel like if you're getting 25, 26 points, 30 points from Stanley Rakovic, and he's able to contribute what he does in terms of the other aspects as well, all you need is probably one or two other players to chip in offensively, and you might have enough scoring from that potentially alone.
Sure. And I think that, if teams are willing to take that and are willing to say, hey, if we just let one player beat us and nobody else, fine. Kind of like the reverse psychology of what a box in one would be, where you take away that main option and let everybody else beat you around them. But, the road does not get any easier for Derry. And I think, you look at their last few games, they've kind of had up and down, a little bit of hit or miss here and there. They also lost to Deer Lakes. I know non-section, but still.
That's a really good Deer Lakes
very
team.
good Deer
I think
Lakes
that was
team.
A good challenge for them.
Without question. And they play EF in the second to last game of the season, the penultimate game of the season at home. And that's another thing with Derry. They have a very favorable schedule to finish the season, 3 of their last 4 at home. So that's something else for the Trojans to look at and say, hey, if we are going to make ourselves a legitimate threat, we need to be an absolute force on home court.
Well, let's shift over to the girls' side of action. And Franklin Regional, they continue to prove that they are one of the best teams in Class 5A so far this season. Most recently, a significant win at home against Shaler Area in a battle for first place. They hand the Titans their first loss in Class 5A Section 1. The Panthers, who followed it up with another victory later in the week, are now 7-0. I thought, the fact that they were able to get past Fox Chapel at home, that was kind of a litmus test for them. They passed that challenge. But I wondered, would they be able to beat Shaler, as the Titans have basically beaten everyone, including Norwin from Class 6A? The fact that the Panthers came back double digits in the second half really showed the intestinal fortitude, the mettle, because we know they have talent, they have size. DeRiggi provides a terrific ball handler and floor general and defensive menace. But there's something about, you can have all the physical attributes and ingredients. The most important one might be the mental aspect that they've shown over the last couple of weeks. And they did so again against Plumjack, a game that you, I'm sure, saw the end of.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was going to lead with. I mean, they basically, I didn't see the game against Shaler, but, you're down by 8 at halftime. Mind you, they're down double digits in the second half against Shaler. They were down 12 in the third quarter against the Titans. Against Plum, it was nearly identical. First half, Dan Flickinger and I were setting up for the PT Franklin Regional boys game afterwards. And, watching them against Plum, it was evident Plum was handing it to them early on and often. And they were down 8-10 points. I don't think it got anything bigger than that, but it was a pretty steady 8 to 10 points, which can be a real slow, painful death sometimes for some teams. And you give Franklin Regional credit. They came back in the second half, meticulously got back into it. Torrin Fulton exploded. I mean, 23 points for her against Plum. And I think that's where, you mentioned Madison DeRiggi, you mentioned the other pieces that they have, Addison Musto as well. But Torrin Fulton, I think, with the experience she's had at the varsity level and the fact that she's been on these teams that have come so close to making big playoff runs or so close to making a run at a section title, I'm sure it's in the back of her mind. She wants to go out with a bang, if you will. And I think that right now, the way that they're playing, there's kind of a magic around Franklin Regional. You look at last year for the boys, I remember you and I talking about it. There was just something about it. I don't mean to bring up another sport, but, with Penn Trafford and their football teams run to the state title, there's just an aura around the team right now for Franklin Regional that feels very different right now. And I think that if they keep it going, from what I saw, I don't think Alyssa Bridges played on Friday either. And she's been a fantastic addition in the lineup as a freshman.
Rebounder. Truly fantastic. A dominant rebounder.
And if she plays with Fulton, that is a dangerous tandem down low, a ton of height to have to get through. So Franklin Regional with two really impressive wins, trailing in the first half, trailing in the second half, and finding ways to win. Mind you, Sean, they won by 9 against Plum. So you think of it that way, 8 to 10 points, that's a 16, 18, 19-point swing in a half of basketball. That's a big swing.
Well, and Maddie DeRiggi was incredible against Shaler as well. 22 points, despite the fact that she was saddled with 4 fouls that kept her in the game, and she rewarded her coach, Bernie Puchka, with a terrific closeout effort in the fourth quarter. Well, you talked about you were preparing for Franklin Regional and PT boys on Friday. You had the call of that one, and the Warriors have now swept the season series. Wasn't quite as dramatic as the first meeting that went in favor of PT as well. They won by 8 in this one. Braden Stone led the way. And so we talked about Greater Latrobe in that section, Uniontown, Gateway. Right now, Penn Trafford's the number 4 team, and certainly a win like this could go a long way towards just getting them into the playoffs in what is a very competitive and kind of jumbled mess in the middle of that section, because McKeesport's right there as well. But now, with that win, it creates some separation between PT and Franklin Regional, the 6th place team.
Especially with the way we've seen, teams like Franklin Regional kind of figure it out at the end of the season, right? And again, go back to the girls last year, they figured it out at the end of the year. And a team like Penn Trafford boys, who we've seen over the last few seasons, do the same thing, win 4 of their last 5 and find their way into the playoffs. But this was a game that it felt like it was never really close from the start. I mean, Penn Trafford, again, just stuck it to Franklin Regional. Braden Stone had 10 of his 20 points in the first quarter. The way he was playing, he looked like he had another level of confidence. I mean, he's hitting, one dribble pull-up three-pointer from the top of the key. And, that's a hard shot for a high school player to make. And he made that effortless. It was a long night for Franklin Regional. I give them a lot of credit, though. Jesse Reed always finds a way to make those adjustments in the second half. His team got within 6, but they just couldn't get over that hump. And I think we're also starting to see some of the inexperience from Franklin Regional, without a doubt. I mean, that's what Greg Bizignani and I mentioned. There's a lot of youth on this team playing some big minutes, and it's hard to replace 4 seniors from last year that played a ton of varsity basketball. Connor Crossy's done everything he can to take over that scoring load, and Jonah Johnston's been really good as well. I've been impressed with Anthony Mitchell, but it's hard to compete with experienced varsity players that PT has versus, a Franklin Regional team that's rolling out sophomores. They're playing, some freshmen even. And so I just felt this was a big win for PT, huge confidence booster for them. And I think for the first time this year, they've won back-to-back games. So maybe here we're seeing some momentum being built.
Yeah, perhaps turning a corner for Coach Kelly's squad. By the way, of course, his ties to Franklin Regional, well documented. So that's always, I would imagine, a little bit interesting for him to go against the Panthers, but I'm sure he's very happy to come out with the victory there in Murraysville. Well, our final big takeaway, Jack, is a very difficult story, unfortunately, for us to talk about because, 1, we're not going to speculate, but 2, it's just something you never want to read or never want to hear, and that's a coach under investigation, and that's what happened to Hempfield Area's boys basketball coach, Bill Swan. It came out Tuesday that he was under investigation. There were, I guess, a complaint or multiple complaints that the school board wanted to look into. And so what happened was it kind of short-circuited the entire week for the basketball team. They were not able to play their game as scheduled on Tuesday against Norwin, a game that we were going to cover. Of course, that's a big matchup. It's always a rivalry, regardless of what the team's records are. This year, even more meaningful because they're both contending for playoff spots. So then the Spartans come back and play Friday. They do so without Coach Swan. Mark Katarski, our pal, was filling in as the head coach. And I don't think it's a surprise they got blown out at home against the Blue Devils. They lost 60-27. There's no way that they could have been fully focused despite the best efforts of Coach Kotarski and I'm sure the players to try to focus on the task at hand. We still don't know what the end result's going to be or when they're going to make up that game against Norwin. And now we just have to wonder how these players, these high school age young men, are going to handle this situation, what ultimately is going to come of it. And ultimately, I think that the season to some extent will be decided by how everything plays out off the court, which is, always challenging.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you want to talk about terrible timing. This is really terrible timing. And it's an unfortunate situation for, obviously Coach Swan. I know when we've worked with him in the past, he's always been great to us and very gracious to us with his time and post-game interviews and whatnot. But, you really feel for the players in this situation. And I think on top of it, that game Friday, that was their first game in a week. And I'm sure a lot of those players, they probably haven't had an instance in quite some time, a couple weeks, maybe a few months now, where, they're only playing one game a week. I mean, that's, you're doing that really early in the season, maybe the first 2 weeks of the year, right? I mean, outside of that never happens. So this is a tough situation, especially with the way that the Spartans had been playing. I mean, like you mentioned, Sean, they were in the position, a really good position, mind you, to be in the playoffs. I mean, last I checked, I think they were, 2 games above 500 in their overall record. They were playing really good basketball.
Making significant strides from a year ago when they had a tough season.
Even 2 years ago. I mean, it feels like there's been a constant hump, if you will, that keeps running into Hempfield, where they have a lot of talent, or they've got you go back to, I'm forgetting Drew Gordon's brother, Sean Gordon's years when he played. You go back to Harry Sowers. You have these players that, that were really, even going back to Case and Harrell, right, where they have all of this talent, and then it just becomes very underwhelming, right? And then it flops or whatever happens, and it just feels that there was something special this year. Obviously, in 6A, I think you have Upper St. Clair that's kind of running the table. But when you have a game where you almost beat a team in Amani Christian that was dominant, to say the least, in 1A, and you almost beat them, Hempfield area, mind you, a team that, again, like you mentioned last year, just not a good season at all. It's an unfortunate kind of way for this season to now quickly pivot. And for these players, and, hey, listen, if you want to have an individual step in at a good time, Coach Kotarski, I think, is the great person to do that. He can come in. He's obviously been around the block many years coaching at high levels. He's exactly who they need, I think, to try and just settle everyone down, keep them focused. But this is just really, really tough timing for a team that was playing really good basketball.
Absolutely. And again, that is still undetermined how it's ultimately going to play out. That will be a story that a lot of people will be monitoring in the weeks to come. That'll do it for our starting 5 takeaways. We'll quickly transition to our plays of the week. Now we have 3 plays from this past week, and we begin with the Franklin Regional girls, and the Panthers forged a second half comeback, and it was Maddie DeRiggi leading the Surge against Shaler despite playing with 4 fouls. Her steal and layup pulled FR even in the fourth quarter, with myself and Roger Down providing the commentary.
Panthers down by 2, now had 3. There's DeRiggi with the steal.
Picked a time to be aggressive, and it paid off. Maddie DeRiggi has tied the game. The old pick 2 by DeRiggi. Jack, it was so impressive that she was able to stay out there with 4 fouls, and initially you could see there was some hesitancy because she's super aggressive defensively normally. She had to kind of scale back, but she picked her spots, and she picked them well, stayed in, finished the game, and really a little bit defensively and primarily offensively kind of got them across the finish line for that victory. We continue plays of the week with the Norwin boys, and the Knights won convincingly on Friday at home against Connellsville, keyed by a dominant fourth quarter. Chris McKnight played a part of that surge. His impressive finish punctuated the impressive Norwin performance, as detailed by myself and once again Roger.
He had 31 points in that game. He's got 22 so far here tonight. Still by McKnight. He's off and running. Euro step finish by McKnight. Defense to offense for Chris McKnight. And Cam Alt is fired up. He loves to see that. A spectacular finish by McKnight. And the Knights running away with this one.
I love seeing the energy from head coach Cam Ald there, and I asked him about it after the game. He is so young and so energetic. I mean, he was playing less than a year or less than a decade ago, not less than a year ago, less than a decade ago. He was a member of the Knights team. And he said in the interview process, one of his best qualities that he boasted was the fact that he's going to have energy, endless energy, it seems, and certainly that reaction. We'll wrap up Plays of the Week with the Penn Trafford boys, and the Warriors completed a sweep of Franklin Regional on Friday with Braden Stone leading the way. His steal and scored in the third quarter was a catalyst, with Jack providing the caption.
This Panthers team dropped 3 of their last 5. Stone rips it free all the way to the 10 for 2, leading the double figures for the first time tonight. Full timeout for Coach Reed, and that means a full timeout for us right here on WSN. Penn Trafford stomping on the gas, trying to take this to the finish line on WSN.
Just a tremendous performance from Braden Stone the whole way through. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, played with confidence from the start, and those are 2 of his 20 points in that big win against FR.
Yeah, a big time performance from the future Griffin baseball player, by the way. Congrats to him on that. Well, we go from Plays of the Week to our Team of the Week, and well-deserved, the Kiski Area Cavaliers boys. They are just 1 game over 500 overall, Jack, but they have won where it really counts, and that is in section play. They're now 5-1 in Class 5A Section 2. Well, they are on a 4-game winning streak, but the one that everyone took notice of occurred last week. They knock off Penn Hills at home for the Cavaliers, 68-53 over the Indians. They are now in first place. Because of that, Penn Hills was the team in front of them in the standings. And it seems like they are peaking at the right time. I mentioned it, that they're 7-6 overall, but winners of 4 straight, knocking off Penn Hills. They won a game lopsided at Plum. They defeated Shaler by 20. They won by 25 at Armstrong. So they are clearly playing their best basketball. And our pal Corey Smith, guiding the way as the head coach, has to be awfully proud of his team's performance recently.
And you look at their out-of-conference schedule, out-of-section schedule, I think it's what's helped them get to this point. I mean, they had a tough loss against Upper St. Clair, who, I mean, we know they're, let's face it, probably the favorites in 6A this year. Another, team in Butler that's always been competitive over the last few years in 6A as well. You play a Franklin Regional team that's always been competitive, and then a very good GCC team who we've seen, obviously a lower classification, but still very competitive. And it feels like now everything from those early season losses is culminating into this nice little run that they're on. And I think that they can keep it going. And that win against Penn Hills, Sean, that can be huge for them down the stretch, because they played Penn Hills in the third to last game of the season. That could be a situation where Penn Hills is in a must-win scenario. And with the way Kiski Area has been playing and the way that Coach Smith has them playing right now, for Penn Hills, I'm sure that's going to be a tough fight, because this is a really good team. This is a solid team that's a top 5 defense in all of Class 5A. Okay, they limit teams to under 50 points a game. So that's how they're getting it done. Guys like Carson Heinley, Jacob Musselman have been really good as well. So if Kiski can keep this going and they keep the peak going, they don't peak too early, I think that they can make this deep run into playoffs as well.
Cavaliers jumped out to an early lead, 15-4 after the first quarter against Penn Hills. You mentioned Heinley. He had 21 points. We know how good of a football player he has been. Certainly, he's getting it done on the hardwood. Musselman's a guy that I didn't really know much about, but he's putting up some big scoring numbers. Of course, they have senior guard Colin Keller, who's been a big contributor for multiple years. Amari Gonzalez, the junior. It feels like there's been a Gonzalez who's been a catalyst for the Cavaliers. And to that point, Isaiah is now an assistant coach under Corey Smith, who also added Sean Bennis, a former head coach. So he's got a lot of good, aspects on his coaching staff, because you have a veteran who knows what it takes to be head coach. You have a former player who's just a couple years removed from being the star player. So you have different qualities and attributes there. They're going to have some stiff challenges. Obviously, we know the game at Hampton upcoming this week is going to be a big one for them, but this is a team that, I think sometimes we overlook here in Westmoreland County, because you think of teams like Franklin Regional last year, and you think of GCC, and you think of Jeanette. Kiski Area basketball doesn't come to the forefront of my mind when I think of Westmoreland County basketball, but maybe this season's making everyone realize that they should be a forefront.
And I think it's that one season that kind of changes everyone's perspective, right? I mean, you look at these teams that have these 1 year really big runs, and it changes your outlook on them. I mean, you even go back to last year with Burrell, and their run to the WPIAL championship. I think that's completely, at least for me, changed my perception of them. I mean, I didn't really think of them as a basketball school at all, and now it's a little bit of a different perception of them now with them getting to that point. So I think for Kiski Area, this is a team that, for Coach Smith, this is what year, maybe 3 or 4 for him. So he's had this group, this main group for now 4 years. And I know you've mentioned it before, Sean, when a coach has a class for 4 years, that's when you start to see things kind of play out well. And right now, I think that's exactly what we're seeing.
Well, congrats to the Kiski Area Cavaliers, a 4-game winning streak. They're outscoring their opponents by about 7 points on the season. And again, that massive win by 15 points, 68-53 against Penn Hills last week, cemented them as our team of the week. Let's look ahead now, Jack, at some games that hopefully will be played this week. We've got a lot of, if you look at our website right now, it is loaded with live game broadcasts upcoming this week, both high school and college level. We'll begin high school boys. Tuesday, there's some big ones. Greensburg-Salem at Derry Area and Clairton at GCC. Both of those will be on our airwaves. Amani Christian at Norwin, Greater Latrobe at Uniontown. We talked about that being a big one earlier. Burrow at Knock, Bell Vernon area at York. Wednesday, Penn Trafford in a non-section at Thomas Jefferson. Friday, Upper St. Clair at Norwin, Gateway at Franklin Regional. Always a good rivalry matchup between those bordering schools. Kiski Area at Hampton, as we just alluded to. Deer Lakes at Burrow, a championship rematch. Derry Area at Bell Vernon. Elizabeth Forward riding high after this past week goes to play at Greensburg-Salem. Mount Pleasant at Ligonier Valley and Jeanette at Riverview. Saturday, Knock against Bell Vernon and Ligonier Valley against Greensburg-Salem in tournament games. More tournament games on Sunday. GCC against Bell Vernon. That should be a really good one. Derry Area going against Jeanette. On the girls' side, Greater Latrobe at Penn Trafford, a WSN broadcast Monday night, weather permitting. Burrow at Knock, Valley at Derry Area, and Bell Vernon at York rounds out Monday's schedule. Tuesday, Indiana at Kiski Area. Wednesday, we have Ligonier Valley at Greensburg Central Catholic. Thursday, Connellsville at Norwin on our airwaves. Mount Lebanon at Hempfield. Kiski Area at Greensburg-Salem. Derry Area at Burrell. And South Park at Bell Vernon. And then, of course, the college slate this week. Wednesday, Edinburgh against Seton Hill. That is, of course, a women's-men's doubleheader. We'll have that on WSN. Also on Wednesday, Pitt Greensburg at Mount Aloysius on the men's side. Saturday, Gannon at Seton Hill, a doubleheader that we will also have on the Westmoreland Sports Network. And Penn State Barron at Pitt Greensburg on the men's side, also notable on Saturday. Jack, a lot to talk about there, both high school and collegiately.
Yeah, you start with Monday, Greater Latrobe and Penn Trafford. The Warriors put that undefeated record on the line. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're the last remaining girls team in the district to be undefeated. Or if not,
Jeanette was the last boys team to go undefeated. And now, of course, they lost. So we'll see now there's a little bit of pressure. I'll do some quick fact checking as you continue to talk about that. But I think you might be right about the Warriors.
I know they were down to the final 3, but
Shadyside Academy is unblemished as well.
Okay, so they're still within. Okay, but still, final 2 to be undefeated, not too shabby.
And so, don't want to leave out the Scotties.
Yes, okay, fair enough. Top still. Either way, Penn Trafford puts that undefeated record on the line tomorrow. But Seton Hill women's basketball, Sean, we have to take a moment for them because what a season Maeve Gallagher is having with the Griffins. They win on Saturday. Christiane Fry is injured, does not play the game. Their leading scorer, their best player, arguably, and they still get a big win against IUP. The second win ever, if I'm not mistaken, at IUP in program history. Not too shabby, but the game against Gannon, I think that is going to be, you want to talk about another test a week later, that is a major test against a Gannon team that both men's and women's has been really good. I know the Griffins are starved for a win right now. They're coming off a heartbreaking loss on Saturday. Dan Flickinger showed me the final clip of that one. Heartbreaking. That was a tough shot the guy from IUP made. He had 2 Griffins in his face.
It was either at the buzzer or like 1 second left, I guess, technically, right?
He had the ball fake. He had the sidestep. He had 2 guys in his face, kind of like leaning back. It was very not the prettiest shot, and it still went in. So just a heartbreaker for the Griffins. But also for high school basketball, we mentioned it. Kiski and Hampton on Friday. Franklin and Gateway on Friday. I think Franklin and Gateway are 2 teams that are also desperate for wins right now because Franklin is staring in the face of not making the playoffs right now if they don't figure things out quickly. So very busy docket again. Knock on wood, Mr. Meyers. You got that skull cap. Hopefully it stays warm outside enough to have some basketball and no snow this week, hopefully.
And by the way, you talk about Seton Hill without Christian Fry. We know the Cowan twins are really good, but Mia Kalic, I think, is making an argument for player of the year in the PSAC West. She's getting like 20 rebounds per game, in addition to scoring double figures and racking up steals and assists. She has been unbelievable. And while she's not the top scorer on the Griffins, as I said, she might be the best player in the entire PSAC now as a sophomore. So she can bring the ball down the court. Be tuning in.
She can bring the ball down the court. I mean, I think that's why, you look at the loss of Fry. Kalic kind of fits that plug right there because I've seen her many times, takes the ball off a rebound and triggers the break. When you've got a player that can do that, gets the rebound, triggers the break, sets the offense up, has great court vision too. Like you said, Sean, she might be the most versatile player in the conference.
Well, certainly there's going to be a lot to stay tuned with this week on WSN. We will have a slew of broadcasts. And of course, Jack, not just the live broadcast or the archive. You can go back and watch those, of course, but all of the great content we have on our website. Of course, we always have articles all throughout the week. Westmoreland Alum Q&A, our notebook, our Recruiting Thursday. We have various other features, game recaps quite frequently throughout. And of course, the live scores are up there. That's the place to go. I have friends. Where do I check out the scores? Go to our website. It's on the top, the little ticker that is updated for a bevy of different sports. Basketball, of course, at the high school and college level. We have wrestling scores. We have hockey scores, all that. Anyway, this is a basketball show, so we'll focus on that. And now we will put a bow on this one. Of course, you know where to catch us each and every week. It'll be on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. But for now, signing off with my colleague Jack Ridenour, Sean Meyers saying we'll catch you again next time right here on the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.